Hello everyone! Today we are looking at what may be the most famous opening chess trap of all time, which you will almost certainly have the opportunity to play if you ever open the game with the move e4 as white. And after your opponent responds e5, you follow up with knight to f3, attacking the e-pawn. Now most players here will defend the pawn with knight to c6, or they'll play the Petrov defense with a counterattack on your e4 pawn, but once in a while you'll run into a player who decides it's a good idea to play f6, which is a losing move, but it's a move that you'll see more and more frequently as you look at the games of lower and lower rated players. And here white has the opportunity to execute the famous trap beginning with knight takes e5, sacrificing a piece, a move which most seasoned players know is completely winning for white, but there are some critical details you will need to know if you want this to be an easy win. I'm going to show you some moves that are not the most common responses by black, yet whose punishment is not so easy or obvious if you have the white pieces. So in this position, if your opponent is bad enough at chess to allow you the sacrifice on e5, they're probably gonna just play the obvious f takes e5, thinking they've won a piece. But this is not their best move, and I'm going to show you why in a moment. But first, let's look at a better move for black, which you might see every now and then, queen to e7. Now the knight's attacked by the pawn and the queen. The best thing to do is just get the knight out of the way. Queen takes e4 check. You're going to put the bishop in the way. Then you're going to castle. Then you're going to put your rook on this open e-file where it's going to be eyeing the queen and eyeing the king. Black's way behind in development, and white has a completely winning game. However, that line does offer black his best hope of survival. But let's look at what's wrong with the obvious f takes e5. Most of you probably know that the follow-up is queen to h5 check. And you'll see a lot of players block with g6, which of course loses the rook to queen takes e5 check, and the rook is going to be captured next. Sometimes though, a player will realize that this move is not working, and they'll play their only other legal move, which is king to e7. And we still take the pawn on e5 with check. Okay, pretty easy so far. King to f7 is the only legal move. Now of course we want to get more pieces into the attack, so we play bishop c4 check. Easy enough. And here black has two legal moves. You can move the king to g6, or you can block with d5. But why would you do that? Bishop takes pawn check, you've just given up a pawn and your king still has to move. This is why most players who fall into this trap do not have the insight to realize why d5 is the best move here. They will very often play king g6, and this runs into a forced mate. I think this is the line that people are most familiar with. Queen to f5 check. Only square for the king is h6. Now white's attack is just really effortless. You play d4 with the discovered check on the king. You got to block it. The king's running out of squares. Now you go h4. You're threatening to take the pawn with check, winning the queen. Taking on g5 with the pawn is even a bigger threat. King goes to g7. Queen to f7 is mate. Black has no way to answer all these threats. So this is the line that white's really hoping for. But you need to be prepared for d5. Because after you take on d5 with check and the king goes to g6, now things are a little different. In the line we just looked at, queen to f5 check was the next move, but that square is now covered by the bishop since this d-pawn had been sacrificed. So how to proceed as white? Well, you can go ahead with h4, and here white has a couple of winning threats on the board, but you need to be aware of both of them. The most obvious involves the move h5 check. Let's say black plays something like knight c6, we go h5 check, king goes here, now d4, with the discovered check by the bishop, you got to put the pawn in the way. Now that the pawn's in h5, we can take en passant. Discovered check with the rook. King takes on g6, queen h5 check, king here. The checkmate's pretty easy to find. Queen f7 checkmate. Okay, that's what we want. But what if black plays h5, blocking our pawn and giving his king a square? You need to know how to proceed in this case because white only has one really crushing move here and it's not obvious. Here white has to execute his threat number 2, and that is bishop takes b7. You're going to win that rook because this bishop needs to defend against queen to f5 check and cannot take the bishop. You know, if you take, there's queen f5 check, king goes to h6, d4 check, and you can see where this is going. Black needs to play g5. And the quickest mate would start with queen to f7, but I mean, if you just want to make it simple, just go like that and win the black queen. So that's the killer move. Bishop takes b7. And black has avoided checkmate, but he's not saving his rook. He does have this move bishop to d6, attacking the queen. And here you got to play queen to a5. that queen needs to keep an eye on that f5 square, because the threat of queen to f5 is the only thing preventing black from taking that bishop. White will be able to pick up that rook. So this is the key line you got to be aware of, this bishop takes b7. I remember getting to this position when I did not know this trap well enough and being frustrated that I could not find a checkmate. And if you don't play bishop takes b7 here, white is still somewhat better, but not so clearly winning, and black could survive. So just remember bishop takes b7, that's the killer move, unless you have h5 check instead. So those are the absolute essential lines you need to know about this opening trap. If you found this useful, consider subscribing to the channel for more interesting tidbits like this and full analysis of the world's greatest chess games as well. Thank you for watching.